In an environment like that, you cannot make a mistake. There was no room to lose an item of gear. Every day putting your tent up was like this meticulous, surgery almost to make sure that you clip everything in so it can't get blown away and you stake it properly, etc.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, trying to help you find adventure every day in any stage of life. You're going to hear from explorers, adventurers, business owners, and anyone living their life a little more out of the box than usual. Hey folks, I got family here this week, so I can't spend a whole lot of time talking in the intro. I'm sure you're excited about that. Funny enough, today's episode features a lot of discussion about family dynamics around adventure. I'm with Chris Fagan and her husband, Marty, who decided to basically ski almost 600 miles to the South Pole, and talked about logistically how they figured it out with having a 12-year-old son, with friends and family. Crazy, absolutely crazy. But as you'll hear, they are not one-timer adventurers. They are serial, lifelong adventurers, have done some incredible things. In their book, The Expedition is coming out. Two parents risk life and family in an extraordinary quest to the South Pole. It's coming out soon. Please check it out. Everything you need to know is in the show notes for where to find the book, how to buy it. Today's episode is brought to us by Athletic Brewing, the makers of non-alcoholic craft beer. After any adventure, I love to celebrate with a beer, but, not everyone wants the effect of alcohol. Some of us just love the taste of craft beer. Check out Athletic Brewing. As well as CS Instant Coffee. I wake up every morning. The only thing in my life that's consistent is coffee. And that doesn't matter if I'm in the backcountry or in my kitchen. I want coffee. And so if I go to the backcountry, I take CS Instant with me to make it easy, convenient, great stuff. Discounts for both of those in the show notes. All right, I got to get back to my family, and I hope you have one to spend time with as well. Have a great week. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today, we have really another serial entrepreneur, someone who, by a lot of people's standards, parent, professional, adventure's over in your life, but you and your husband said, no, we're going to keep doing adventures, and you've done some crazy stuff, and we're going to talk about two, specifically, the expedition, the book that you just wrote that's not out yet, about your trip to the South Pole, and then also what you just completed, like just a couple weeks ago, the race to Alaska. Chris Fagan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, so I don't even know where to start. So, the book that's coming out, it's called The Expedition, and the subtitle is Two Parents Risk Life and Family in an Extraordinary Quest to the South Pole. That's really intriguing. What in the world do you mean by risking life and family? Because that sounds like a lot to risk, honestly.
So funny you would focus on that in the subtitle, because I went back and forth as to, if that should be in there. And the reality is, you're kind of diving right into the heart of it. But, when we do adventure, we take a certain level of risk. And definitely in this case, outsiders looking in see it as we're risking our life, because we were off on this adventure, dropped off in the middle of nowhere in Antarctica, the edge of Antarctica, just my husband and I. And, we were going to go, our plan was to go 570 miles from the edge of Antarctica to the South Pole, unguided, unassisted, unsupported, meaning there was no professional guide with us. There was no air resupply of food or fuel. There was no assistance of, kites or other kinds of wind advantages to help you move. Basically, you're just pulling these, 220-pound sleds on your own with this goal. So, it definitely, an outsider looking in, it is a risk. And we are parents. My husband and I have a son. And so, but it was definitely a managed risk. We spent 3 years preparing for this adventure, and felt it was well within our skill level. So when, you're sort of, when you say risking life and family, in the end, when I got back from the trip, that really is what we are doing. I have to acknowledge that, but I don't feel like I was risking death. It was something that we felt we were ready for the challenge and up for the task, and that's sort of at the heart of the book. How we wrestle with those kind of questions as parents who also want to adventure.
Oh no, I absolutely understand 100%, because it's you want to be there and you want to be safe and you want to be able to take care of your kids, but you also want them to look at you and say, I want to be like mom, I want to be like dad, because they're doing awesome things with their life. It is a balance, and a lot of people choose one or the other and not try to meet that balance. So I'm glad you guys are actively inspiring your son, as well as inspiring tons of other people, and being as responsible as you can, going to the South Pole.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. I think a lot of us as parents, we want our children to be and act certain ways, and I've learned over time that the best way is to be the example, and that's where our children learn. So you're sort of walking the talk, kind of thing, right?
And now it says your son was 12 when you did this trip, which is, for a lot of people, it seems like, so you'd already been parents for over a decade. What was it that clicked that made you want to do this? You said you planned it for 3 years, so maybe around when he was 8 or 9 years old to do this. Were you and your husband really adventurous before having kids?
Yes, for sure. Gosh, where to answer that question. So my husband and I'll give you the sort of a little bit of backstory. My husband and I were both really interested in mountaineering, and we're doing a lot of mountaineering before we met. And so in 1998, we both found ourselves on separate independent expeditions to climb Denali, which is the highest mountain in Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
At just over 20,000 feet. It's a major, it's one of the 7 summits. It's a major mountaineering expedition. So we both had that interest individually, and long story short, we both sort of were there. I was on an all women's climb, he was on a men's climb, and we both were self-guided and had the skill level to do that. And so we met just because our teams happened to be, summiting or, climbing the mountain at the same time. And we basically summited 2 separate teams within 30 minutes of each other. And we got to know each other on the mountain a little bit. And, sort of a magical spark happened. And 3 months later, he moved from where he was living in Hawaii at the time to Washington State, where I live. And, a year later we were married. So
wow.
We had that adventurous, adventurous spirit separately and came together. So it wasn't like some couples where one person wants to do things and the other kind of has to be like convinced to come along. We already had that seed, in the fabric of our relationship, and really it's been the part of the fabric of our relationship. Now we've been married 20 years. So, from there, we just have been integrating different types of adventure since we've been married. And we went from mountaineering to, once we had our son, mountaineering sort of took too much time away. So we just said, how can we be in the mountains, enjoy the mountains, quicker? And so we really got into ultra running. And if your listeners are not familiar with that, it's really just endurance, long distance running, anything really over a marathon. A lot of the distances in ultra running are 50K, which is 31 miles, or 50-mile, or 100K or 100 miles. So we sort of just progressed in ultra running, and that became our really, we immersed our lives into ultra running for over a decade and became really proficient endurance athletes together. And my son was sort of along for the ride, and he would, we would bring him out on different kind of excursions. He would go to a lot of the races, and it just became something that was part of our family. And in between, we started introducing our son to a lot of adventures that he could do. So anywhere from kayaking the Broken Island group, which is near the San Juan Islands here in the Pacific Northwest. Starting when he was like 2, we'd do this annual trip. Or, once he got older, we would take him. When he turned 7, we thought, how old does your child have to be to want to take him internationally on an adventure? So we were like, 7, that seems about right. Let's test it out. So we ended up taking him to Tanzania, and we planned this bike around Mount Kilimanjaro, sort of a circumnavigation sort of thing, and then some safaring. So we shipped this tag-along bike with us on the plane, and a tag-along bike is like the extension onto your regular mountain bike. And connected that on, and he was a trooper, and he did great. And we've been doing adventures with him ever since. Tanzania, Grand Canyon, hike to the Everest Base Camp, Mount Fuji in Japan, fast packing around some of the great mountains here in the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question, but that gives you a little bit of background.
So to answer my question, yes, you and your husband were adventurous beforehand.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect, because I did want to know like what led to this, because maybe that's not the case from your perspective, but from the outside, it seems like an expedition to the South Pole is kind of the cumulative, all this experience and knowledge going together into something that seems absolutely like pushing anyone's boundaries and anyone's comfort zones, no matter what kind of previous adventure they've had. Was that the case for you guys, even after having, gosh, like you just said, so many interesting experiences? What was it like preparing for the South Pole?
Right. I agree with what you said. Definitely. We were feeling like this was the pinnacle of, basically we had this really almost 2 decades of amazing mountaineering, cold weather mountaineering, as well as endurance running training. And so it was sort of marrying those 2 skill sets of knowing how to be in a really cold, snowy, mountainous environment, although the Antarctica is not mountainous, but it's that cold, knowing how to camp and take care of yourself in the cold, as well as, endurance. And so at the time when we departed, I was 48, my husband was 50, and we had this 20 years of cumulative experience. And we felt like after the 3 years of training that, this was in our bandwidth. When the idea first came up, it definitely pushed the boundaries. I mean, my initial reaction was huge resistance. So it wasn't something that we jumped in with.
Really? So was it your husband's idea or someone else's?
It was my husband bringing up the idea of, do we think this is possible? And not him sort of pushing it, but, hey, do we think this is possible? And it really took us a full year of exploring that question to then say, okay, let's start preparing. So the first year was really researching, talking to as many experts as we could about, going on an expedition to the South Pole, and can we do it by ourselves? We were fully ready to hire, do we want to hire a polar guide, or do we think we're capable of doing this ourselves? And what skills do we need to improve upon in order to be safe and do this on our own? So that was a whole array of questions and answers and exploring and research that took place that first year, finding those, there's no book out there that tells you how to go to the South Pole on your own. That doesn't exist.
Right. That was my initial thing, was thinking, some of these other expeditions you've done, maybe there's not a guidebook, but there's probably more researchable information out there. This is like, there's a handful of people you can talk to, and most of them probably aren't going to do it the way you're doing it, which is with no resupply.
Yeah, that's correct. That is totally correct. So So it's a really small group. And that's why there's no book. There's been no market for that book really,
Well,
but
not until September 2019, of course.
that's right. Well, mine is an adventure take you along versus like, here's all the steps you need to do to, yeah. But, yeah, for sure. But once as any kind of niche sport, once you you start finding the people who are really can help you with that information, then they can pass you on to other people. So we really sort of wormed our way into getting that information from some great experts, sort of that have been there, that have either guided there or also done their own expeditions there. And a lot of these people were quite generous in sharing information with us. And then we really worked to condition our, it was the mental and physical training, as well as getting, sort of the right kit together, the right supplies, the right, custom made sled in Norway, the, knowing how much weight we could carry, how much food per day per person to sustain ourselves, what was enough food, what wasn't enough food, because this sort of journey, you actually walk in knowing you're going to lose weight. There's no way you can carry enough food for the amount of time that you will be there if you're going to go unsupported. So gaining some weight before starting, there was just it's an endless list of things that we had to figure out. We had this running to-do list, and basically every weekend we'd check off some things and then we'd add some more things. So that it was like a list that would never stop growing until sort of the last few months of the preparations before departure.
I've planned some trips in the past, but nothing like this. And I can only imagine, because even simple trips compared to this are all consuming when it comes to logistics and planning. What did people think around you? Maybe family or friends, even your son who was young, but what did everyone think? What was the consensus, you think?
As we were planning at the very beginning of the idea, say 3 years before departure, I think there were sort of two camps. We had done a lot of types of adventures before, so it wasn't super surprising, but there was definitely two camps of we totally believe in you, we're excited about you launching into something exciting and new, and then there was a little bit of worried camp that this seems a little out there, I don't really understand it completely, kind of that sort of, not against it, but definitely with anything we don't understand, we're kind of afraid of those things that we don't understand. And we build stories in our minds about the what ifs that may be a little more extreme than the actual truth. And so, yeah, it was sort of some of those people in that camp warming to the idea over those 3 years, finding out how much research we're doing, finding out how prepared we're going to be, finding out all of our sort of contingency planning that we did, understanding that we had a lot of safety measures in place that may not have been obvious. So
that's a good point.
So definitely a couple camps. People were really inspired, but a little concerned at the same time.
Yeah, and that goes with anything. If someone was just to meet you and they learned what you're doing, they'd probably call you crazy, but what they don't see is the literally 2 decades worth of adventures and planning and similar type things, and a son who has grown up in this environment. The people that knew you well probably didn't expect anything less, honestly.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think one of the problems, or maybe it's the challenges we as adventurers have sometimes, is that there are some people out there that go and do things and take, over the top risk and don't plan. And so then those are the people that sometimes we hear about in the news that, that can kind of extend to other adventures that, we're not all the same, right? So
that's a great point, actually. Yeah, because most people's interaction with something like that is probably in a negative light, something they heard on the news, something sensational. and
Yes.
they don't see the literally almost a college education's worth of research that went into this. You know what I mean? A 3-year planning. I mean, that's an adventure in itself.
I'm telling you, there was you're so right. I mean, there's the adventure before the adventure. Then there's the actual event that you go on. And then writing the book, I mean, that has been another completely additional adventure that almost it has taken the same skill set, the endurance and the sort of perseverance and the research and how to make it all come together. They were just sort of like three parts of this experience that have almost spanned a decade now, from the planning to doing to writing the book and it finally getting out there in the world. So, yeah.
That is something that a lot of people that write a book after an experience like this talk about, is the discipline, the difficulty of having that kind of discipline to sit down, because it's not active as much. It's not as fun all the time. Not that I'm sure, skiing almost 600 miles across the South Pole isn't fun most of the time, but it does have this level of reward that that will be promised to you when you reach the end. So I'm sure it has been just this trilogy of adventures right there together that all are under this one title called Our South Pole Trip.
Yeah, it's true, and building on one thing you just said, I mean, the discipline, there is just something so interesting when I look over the trajectory of the various things that my husband and I have done over the years. And, that's actually a huge theme that also when we talk about where people are in our world today, the instant gratification just is not part of any of these types of adventures. These types of adventures are really all about endurance, mental and physical discipline, and hard work. And yeah, a lot of it really is hard. A lot of the South Pole was, isolation from the world and just going out and putting in your time every day. But the rewards are so, I think, almost equal to the amount of effort put in. I don't know if you've ever done, when you do something really hard, you don't know if you can do it. Then you have this reward that is put you in a place that you never knew you could feel that way. So they're kind of these equal opposing efforts.
So we want to thank our sponsor, Athletic Brewing, for promoting a healthy lifestyle through making some of the world's best non-alcoholic craft beer. They make excellent tasting NA for healthy, active, modern adults. They use certified all-organic grains, and each can of non-alcoholic beer is only between 50 and 70 calories. They have IPA, golden ale, stouts, and tons of seasonal offerings. And recently, they actually just took home the gold medal at the U.S. Open Beer Championships for their double hop IPA. If you would like to get your hands on some, you can save 15% by using the code ADVENTURE at athleticbrewing.com. Athletic Brewing, the best tasting way to keep your promises. And I also want to thank our sponsor, CS Instant Coffee, for making this show happen. They make 100% Arabica instant coffee. They use compostable packaging, and each package makes about 20 ounces of coffee. So I'll take one of those with me on an overnight trip, and it makes 2 pretty good-sized cups of coffee. And it's an awesome feeling knowing I can just throw that in my backpack, find some hot water, and I'm good to go. Save 20% by using the code ADVENTURE at csinstant.coffee. Yeah, I would say it's an investment into the future, because you know, it's like you said, instant gratification usually leaves you feeling a little scummy, maybe not as fulfilled as you imagined it would. Maybe just sitting down and watching TV the rest of the afternoon rather than working on something you really do care about. The first is easier, but you're not going to feel great afterwards. So it is this investment for the future for sure. And what you've done is, it takes so much more. I'm always so blown away. It takes so much more than just being able to literally ski to do something like this. It's so much more than the physical effort. And so many people, I think, that listen to the show, especially, they think, oh, I'm not LeBron James or, some professional athlete. I don't have this just physical specimen to be able to do some of this stuff. But, when you see the people that do it and they're not professional athletes, they're professional endurance athletes, which takes more of a mindset than the physicality of it.
I completely agree with the mindset part, because really the physicality is sort of a price of entry that I do believe most anybody with the right motivation can get there. Like you said, I don't have to be able to, run at a certain pace, etc. Right. But I have to be able to keep going. And so, I think, if we have that motivation to have this end goal, we physically can do it. But so much of the training that we did, and I think that's why ultra running was a great base for us, is mental training. It's really, how can I keep going when my body just doesn't feel good and my legs hurt and I'm really tired and it's raining and I'm getting cold. All of these barriers that really, you're safe, so you can keep going. You just sort of you're training your mind to be able to do things that you just might not. You're training your mind to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and then believing that if I just keep going, things will eventually get better, because they seem to always eventually get better if you just don't stop. Unless you need to stop for some, like I said, actual reason that you're going to hurt yourself. But most of the times it's a mental barrier.
That's obviously a lesson for life. That's perfect. But I did want to ask this. You and your husband had a lot of experience with other adventures. Did this one at all challenge you in a new way, your marriage? Was there times that just seemed more extreme than other adventures, or was it just kind of a continuation of what you already knew about each other?
Yeah, with this adventure, it definitely it was sort of a continuation, but pushed us deeper into those territories that you may get into on somewhat shorter adventures. And what I mean by that is, the first week or two, we were in familiar territory as far as ups and downs and how we both can support each other in that regard. But as you get deeper and deeper into this journey, what was different is that the cumulative effect of every single day getting up and going out into the challenging environment, into the, whiteouts or low light, difficulty in navigating through those kinds of situations. Some of the terrain got really difficult. We hit people think it's flat, but really the terrain for a large part of this route was this bumpy, windblown snow called sastrugi, which is basically kind of frozen waves of snow that you're going through. So it's not flat, and it's actually a gradual uphill from the sea to the South Pole is actually at 9,000 feet. So it's a gradual uphill, but it's definitely not flat. So the cumulative effect on you physically and mentally starts to carry over to how you feel at the end of each day. So we definitely have seen each other at our lows, but we hit lower lows, I believe, in this journey. Harder challenges to keep your mind positive. And I think what was different in this journey as a couple was that we hit those places simultaneously sometimes. Once we got into like past 30 days, 35 days, we really started hitting it was hard on all levels. And that isolation from, there's no people, there's no culture, there's nothing, sights to look at that are different, really, really became the challenge. And so I don't think we never really got angry at each other, but our stress levels increased where we sort of retreated into ourselves more than our daily normal life or on other expeditions that have been challenging. So we had to sort of work through that a little bit. And, definitely we'd have breakdowns. I personally, during those times, you would just hit these places where you just collapse into the tent at the end of the day, and I just burst out crying because it was starting to become your stress reliever would be like to talk to your husband or to go out and exercise, but those stress relievers weren't there in this situation. So, but that deeper level of sort of exposure and vulnerability in the end brought us even closer because kind of there's nowhere to hide in your 10 by 10 tent at the end of the day. And during the day, you're literally just following each other. One of you is leading, one is navigating, one's following, and then we switch. And so you're in these isolated in your head. You can't really talk to each other. So those were definitely some of the challenges. But in the end, and being able to get through that together, have that shared intense experience in the end has been a positive thing for our relationship.
I decided to Google sastrugi because I've never heard of that, and I've definitely seen pictures of that and knew that there's a lot of that out there. But I was visualizing just kind of what you're going through as you were talking, and I can't imagine. I really just can't imagine day after day of that with your husband, not having relief. Like you said, that's a great point. No cultural relief, nothing new, no new faces, no new, really every inch is new, but it's all the same at the same time. I mean, where do you go in your head? What did you do? Do you sing? Do you have anything to listen to?
Yeah, that's a great question. First we kept, we would keep things really quiet. We didn't listen to music. We just wanted to be aware of our environment. But the further we went along on the journey and we got comfortable with the environment, and then we started sort of that repetition started happening, we definitely had music and audiobooks with us. So we would listen to that periodically throughout the day because our days really average like 9-10 hours out there hardworking each day. So we would listen to that. Sometimes I would sing because you're just singing to yourself or you're just singing along. And yeah, your mind would wander. And it was very similar to when we were training for ultra running. We would run 10, 15 hours running, and it was a lot of the similar kinds of things you'd listen to. So, and I think the other thing that would happen is to pass the time, you sometimes would just have to remember, why are we doing this again? Because that becomes something that you're like, I really have to remind myself what's the motivation behind this. And while I'm describing a lot of this isolation and hard work, just this Antarctica is one of the last wild places on Earth that, the beauty of that kind of barrenness, that otherworldliness is something that few people will ever experience in the world. And it is tremendously beautiful to have that endless horizon. The sun is up all the time. We were there during the summer, so it literally is just sort of revolving around your head. So it's sunny all the time. And so you're just watching your shadow change. And the simplicity of the environment, there's no wild animals on the interior to be concerned about. There's no polar bears. Those are in the North Pole. And so you really get to just let go of everything that we're used to in living life in a civilized place. There's nothing there. You're carrying everything that you need. And so anyway, getting back to your question, yes, your mind wanders to all of these things, and plenty of time to cover all of them.
I can only imagine. I bet you thought of I can't imagine where your mind would go, just knowing it was like a blank canvas. At least other places there is the bounds of familiarity, whether even on a long distance hike, you're you're on a trail. There's usually other people. There's trees and birds and animals to watch out for. This is literally like walking in a wide open nothingness into nothingness for what seems like forever, I'm sure.
Yes, that added to that mental challenge. It's mentally challenging to go out every day, but those conditions added to that. And that's when I say you sort of meet the depths of yourself in this kind of journey, because there's nothing else but you. I mean, I'm there with my husband, of course, but for so many of the hours a day, there's nothing there but you. And so for sure, your mind wanders back to actually, flashing back to parts of your life and things, which actually I include in the book. So, my book is more than just like the kind of book that would chronicle the 48 days, which is what it took us to do this journey. It's so much more about our background, where we came from, and how our family and community supported us in this type of journey, and how sort of anything big that you do, that support and building community around you is so important. And so I would reflect on a lot of those things, and all the kids that were following us back in, Seattle and the surrounding area. We live in North Bend, Washington, outside of Seattle. My son at the time was in 6th grade. His entire school was following us. And so I would think about them and not wanting to let them down. And we blogged every single day, leaving a voice blog of 3 minutes. And we had a team that was posting that on our website and then translating it. So these kids were doing a daily check-in on where we were, what we were doing, how were we doing, how were we sounding. And so all of that kept, me motivated and thinking about, what do I want to share with the kids today? We had kids following from various places in the country and the world. We had a day where we actually did a phone call with the entire school, his school, and they had the gymnasium full, and we just did an audio call where kids walked up to the microphone and asked us questions. And that was just so motivating and so exciting. And the screams from 6,000 miles away of that gymnasium lighting up when we said hello from Antarctica. Those sorts of things really kept us going. I mean, more than anything, that is what kept us going once we sort of got in past that day 30, 35, where I could visualize these kids opening up that blog, listening to that blog every day.
That is, that is amazing. That would be so cool. First of all, as a kid. Second of all, as the child of these two amazing people, to say that's my mom and dad that we're all cheering for. And also, obviously, for you guys, the motivation is just, it's hard to replicate a feeling like that.
Yeah, and what was interesting for my son, because the school, they had a bulletin board up showing our location every day, and because they were so immersed in following us, he had this complete support network while we were gone. At school, we had met with all of his teachers, prior to leaving, and they had our whole plan of what was going to be happening at home, because one of the pieces of that 3 years of organizing was creating what we called our, it was the support book for my son Keenan. It was this 40-page document of everything to do to support Keenan at our house, and at basketball practice and at band practice. And so how to parent when you're not there, you really can't do it. But we built this great team, and one of the things that we did was make sure that he could stay at home in his own environment and do his day-to-day routine as usual. And so we had tremendous support from our families. Every week to 10 days, a different set of people, his aunts and uncles, and different people would come in and live here with him and our dog and just be his support people. And he's an only child, so it became a really cool at-home adventure for him to build these relationships with aunts and uncles from out of town that he hadn't got to spend that kind of intense time with, and have their own inside jokes now, years later, from that time together. And really at that critical point in his life when, preteen, start to feel your own independence, it was all really tremendous. It turned out all the worries I had about leaving him and somehow damaging him by being gone for a few months really did not come to fruition. It turned out that he really thrived, and he made me so proud, just the way that he took on that adventure, because we did the adventure. He sort of was forced to, but he really took it on as his own.
It was, an adventure for him, to say the least, as well. And so, I actually like that point you said, being able to spend this in more intense time with family, that there's no other time in life you really get to do that. I think of some of the best experiences I have with some kind of more distant aunts and uncles or cousins. It's usually like one weekend we had together, just uninterrupted. And that is like the whole basis for our whole relationship now. And we feel like we really know each other because of that. I can't imagine, 10 days with people that you just would never get an experience like that with. So that's really cool that you guys were able to do that and keep it familiar for him.
The other part of that, which was really, really great, was, we felt, I felt this kind of parental guilt for being gone during key holidays. So the time frame for this type of expedition to the South Pole is during their summer, which would be November through January. And so we left a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. And so we have all these Thanksgiving traditions. And so some of our really good friends brought their kids and stayed with him, and they made, new Thanksgiving traditions and had so much fun. And then they had so much fun. They were the same people who came back for Christmas. And they did our same Christmas traditions, we always go and get our tree at this one place, and we always get this hot apple cider and, chocolate chip cookies there. And so they just did all of the same things, only they created a new versions. And they told me that was actually turned out to be their kids. One of their favorite Christmases ever was the Christmas they got to spend with my son Keenan. And, so I love that so much, New Year's. So all of these key kind of time frames, like you said, have etched in his mind. He still references those with these people, and they all came with like a week to 10 days of fun ideas of things to do with Keenan. I think by the end he was getting tired of having so much fun. Like, can I just have some downtime? But it was just a lot of fun experiences to have with people.
Wow. Yeah, he's having a blast. You guys out there having a blast in the middle of nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Yeah, trying to survive. Golly. So that's an interesting spin that we don't always get to talk to with people who maybe both parents don't go on an adventure, or a lot of adventures, frankly, on the show don't have kids yet.
Yep.
Or their kids are adults, so it's not a huge problem. So yeah, that's really, wow. It really does start to show you what actually is possible when you don't say, oh, we can't do that, but say, how could we figure this out? That is just framing the mind differently, opens up this entire new world.
Exactly. Yep.
So did you guys think, since it was self-guided and there wasn't any resupply, and you talked a few times getting towards the end of that trip, how did that go for you? Were you successful in planning it and preparing the food and all that? Did it go pretty well?
Yes. In this case, we had estimated that our that are based on all these discussions and research, we thought that we would be able to accomplish this journey in about 40 to 45 days. So we thought 40 days, and then we brought 5 extra days of food. That's 45 days. In the end, it took us 48 days, but we could plot out that trajectory well in advance of that 45th day. So we didn't run out of food. We could see that we were just not going quite as fast as we had imagined. What we had imagined was that we would cover approximately 15 miles a day. But what turned out to have happened, I think we averaged closer to 13. And part of that was we had this belief going in that as we started, going and eating our food and our sled would get lighter, that we would, sort of get faster as we kind of acclimatized to everything. But what happened was around that time when it was getting lighter, the sleds were getting lighter. We were hitting harder and harder type of terrain, more whiteouts that take a lot longer to navigate through, and our pace just wasn't what we thought it would be. So, it was pretty clear that we, by about day 35, that we weren't suddenly going to start going 20 miles a day, because the terrain looked, we thought maybe we'll go 15, but we were already. So we figured out that we just started readjusting the food at least 10 days earlier, taking some of the food calories away, building some more days. So we didn't run out of food, but we just had to start having less calories per day. So that, that worked out okay. The other thing that we were told was it would be great to be able to take a rest day about every 10 days. This is what some of the guides told us they tried to plan. But by day 10 of our expedition, we felt like we weren't hitting those mile markers yet. And we thought, well, we're not overly tired, so let's just keep going. So we took a rest day at day 21, which we really needed. Just mentally, we needed a break. That day was so reviving for us. And it was a couple days before Christmas. So we decided we had brought some special food for to celebrate Christmas. So we decided to celebrate Christmas early, and we just spent the whole day sleeping in, eating all this awesome Christmas meals that we had brought along. And then our friends had videotaped these messages to us, and we had them on our little iPod Nano. That was the biggest screen we had, like 2x2. And so we had these little messages from everybody that we'd been saving. And so we watched all these. We were going to just like drip, watch them every few days, but we couldn't, we were gorging ourselves this day. So we just gorged ourselves on all these messages from friends, and it just so filled us up to power us on. But unfortunately, we would around that day 30, 35, it would have been great to have another rest day, but we chose not to take one because we were really concerned about our food supplies running low, and what if some kind of storm or something hits that is going to force us to be in the tent. So we kept pushing on. And so if I was to be able to do it again, I would love to have at least one more rest day. But in our circumstances, I probably would have made that same decision.
With all the unknowns, yeah, that's probably wise. You may be forced one day to stay in the tent, but wow, one rest day. Good gracious, at 21 days, not even. It's unreal. 21 days of doing this, 21 days of working every day is a pain in the butt, much less doing what you're doing. That is just crazy to me. But you say 3 days extra and you guys planned it out. To me, that sounds like you did a fabulous job planning, because I wouldn't even know how to start. You know what I'm saying? So with you guys being able to project it and then see and make the adjustment ahead of time, gosh, what an achievement in itself to be able to say I planned this.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because that really was the culmination of that 3 years of planning, research, talking to people, understanding our bodies, understanding nutrition, understanding what we needed to keep us fueled, yet not overload us. I mean, it was really a fine line of trying to understand what you could or couldn't bring. And so much of the weight in our sleds was food and fuel, and, try to minimize luxury items, and, only a couple different, we really only had like 2 versions of clothes. There's for the 48 days, but you just had various layers, so.
Yeah, there's so much to it that, from the world of backpacking where you can't have water to wash things or to clean things. There's so much you had to go without, and so many ways you had to think differently and give up, and not going through supply towns. Gosh, that is unreal, unbelievable. And so what was the feeling when you saw the South Pole, or what began to happen? Did you see buildings, or did you see the actual pole? And what was that like for you?
Right. So at day 47, we knew how far away that we were from the pole, and we wondered. and we knew there were these buildings there. I don't know if listeners know, but at the South Pole is the U.S. Research base.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this big building and other outbuildings, and research is done there. And so we knew at some point we were going to see these buildings, but we didn't know how far away it would be. And also, it's sort of, the terrain is a little bit undulating because you're on a glacier, and so you may not, be seeing directly into the horizon at all times. So what happened was, on day 47, I'm skiing along, and I just see this glint sort of reflecting off the horizon that looked different. It just looked like a piece of snow far off in the distance, but it was reflecting way too much. And I thought, what is that? That is something different, because you're staring at this terrain for so many days. You recognize this small difference. And in fact, it was a little piece of the pole. And I was staring at it so hard, I actually was and skiing faster, wanting to get to see what it is. And my skis kind of clipped on some of this frozen ice sticking out, sastrugi. I fell over and sort of stand up, yelling at my husband, I see something, and we look hard and we see that it is a building, or it's something, and we just start jumping up and down like crazy maniacs, laughing, screaming, smiling. It was the biggest surge of an adrenaline I'd had in weeks, because you could see the finish line, and you knew instantly, no matter what, if our tent blows away, if it burns down, whatever happens, we can scratch our way to the finish, because we turned on our GPS, it was 16 miles away. And so we were just about beyond excitement, and it really, you realize how much stress you'd been carrying all those days, because in an environment like that, you cannot make a mistake. There is no room for error to be safe. That was our feeling, at least. There was no room to lose an item of gear, blow away in the wind, or every day putting your tent up was like this meticulous surgery almost, to make sure that you clip everything in so it can't get blown away, and you stake it properly, etc. And seeing that pole was tremendous. The rest of that day, we had about 3 more hours of skiing until we were going to set up camp. We just skied with abandon. I skied with such delight and such purpose, and I didn't have to look at my compass anymore, because I had something I could just look at. Because so often there's no bearing. There's nothing to take a bearing on in Antarctica. So you're taking a bearing on like a piece of snow sticking up that's a 15-minute ski away. There's not like a tree or a mountain that you can just go towards. So that was really exciting and awesome.
I'm just trying to visualize it. What a feeling to be so excited, first of all, to see some crummy, building that's probably drab, on the outside, in all honesty, it's just like, there's something to look at that isn't white and frozen solid. and to think, we don't have to ration fuel or worry about, like you said, the tent working correctly or anything. We can kind of let go of all that, knowing we're this close, and then really enjoy the last 15 or so miles, thinking about everything we're about to experience, seeing the pole itself, making our way back home, and, congratulations from all these people. It had to be just a moment, it's really, really unique, really unique.
It's for sure, it's etched in my mind. It's one of those moments that I can close my eyes and put myself in that moment still easily today. What was interesting that emerged, so we ended up camping because we didn't have enough, that's like a full day's ski to get there. We ticked off maybe 4 more miles ish. So we had about 11 miles left to get to the pole the final day. And you would think that adrenaline and excitement would carry over to the next morning. And interestingly, for some reason, it didn't, because I think the gravity of what we had read, what we knew is that 11 miles is a long way in this environment, and we cannot let down our guard because it's so close. And we put our wind meter and temperature meter out the tent door, out the vestibule to measure the temperature that morning. And it gets colder as you get closer to the pole. That's just the wind, how the wind and weather works on that continent. And we put the temperature gauge out, and it read 50 below, and that included wind chill. And that was the coldest day we'd ever logged, that we'd measured. And the severity of those kind of conditions, it kind of took away that excitement. It dulled it until, because we needed to be really meticulous, really careful. And we had a small little my husband had a little mishap that morning where he went out, you go out of the tent to go to the bathroom, and you have all these layers on, and he came back in. We usually take care of going to the bathroom, and then we come back in, and then we finish packing, and then everything's packed up, and then you're going. You have to time it really well so you're not standing around and getting cold. And so that morning he went out and came back in, and he had his layers were kind of all messed up. He's trying to fix them, and in that process of kind of getting everything reorganized after using the bathroom, he forgot to put on one of his by that time we were wearing multiple hats and hoods and things, and he forgot to put on his really warm balaclava, which covers his entire face. And he had his other things over, but not this really warm balaclava. So by the time we get going, we're all packed up, we have our skis on, snapped in, this whole meticulous process. He realizes he doesn't have his balaclava on, and his head is getting cold, and we're just starting off for the day. And this is a critical moment where you just want to start moving and getting warm. You're on the edge of getting cold, but yet he has to now stop, dig in his sled, find a balaclava, take stuff off, take his gloves off, put everything back on. And he got really cold. His hands were on the edge of being little frozen clumps. And so we had to set off with this kind of, and I'm standing around getting cold. We had to set off being really cold. And so the way you warm yourself up is to just go faster to try to get that blood moving. But our energy reserves weren't allowing us to kind of hit that gear. That fast gear was kind of gone. So we were hitting our medium gear, and it was really hard that entire day to get warmed up. And my husband Marty's hands were really, I had to, they were like little frozen clumps. We would stop for these little breaks and for 5 minutes to eat like half a bar and shove it in and keep going. And that day we just decided after one break, it was too hard. We were too cold. We just need to push on. And so we felt like we were, it was like Antarctica wasn't going to hand us this finish. It was going to be challenged till the very end. So, but once we were a couple miles outside and really could see everything at the pole, we some of that cold sort of went away. We stopped, and we put on these giant puffy jackets that we have, which were too big to wear and ski in. They just were too. They weren't efficient, but for that last mile, we didn't care. We'd just go slow, finally get warm. And that's when all that excitement reemerged in us, that here we are, tears in the goggles, we're going to make it. And what we decided to do at that last moment was, about a couple hundred yards from the actual finish, we pulled out our sat phone, and we decided to call our son and share that exact moment with him. So in Seattle at that time, in North Bend where we live, it was around 10, 11 a.m. And I knew that, and it was a Saturday, so he was home from school. And so we called him, he was there, and we got to say, we're at the South Pole. As we're walking to the South Pole, we got to say that and share that moment with him, which really actually was the perfect moment.
I mean, the more you share, the more details you share, the more epic the story becomes. I had no idea that you did that. Wow, what a moment to share as a family, like you said, 6,000 miles apart.
Yeah, it really was. And like you said, the moment of getting to your goal is something that ever lives in your mind, but it was really that all of us getting that goal. We reached this goal, but our son got to share it with us because he, in the end, kind of had his own South Pole that he was going through, his own summit, his own I made it kind of thing. Yeah.
I mean, that's just I don't know. You do a great job describing it and putting us there, and so I appreciate that. And what an experience! A little bit speechless, honestly.
Yeah, it was a tremendous experience, and I feel really privileged to have been able to accomplish that with my husband and all the great support that we had, and then to go on and write the story and kind of capture that. It was important to me. It was important to me for a few reasons. Most of all, I wanted to write the book for my son because I thought, when you're writing a book, you're thinking about who your audience is. And I thought, if no one ever buys this book, which I really hope people buy the book, but if nothing else, this is all of the details that he may not have ever even known to ask when he was 12 years old, but now he's almost 18. And, this is something that can chronicle a really awesome event in his life too, because he's embedded in the story. And so sharing it for him and, and I wanted to just write the book because it was a different kind of vantage point than I love adventure books. My shelf is full of every kind of adventure book you can imagine. And I love even sports I don't necessarily participate in. I love those adventures. And so much of those adventures don't tell. I feel a lot of times it's really just focused on the adventure and not enough about, and not about the characters. And I really wanted to present a book where you get to know the character of the people beyond just their adventure. How are they in life? How do they treat each other? What are their values? How do they get to be these kinds of people? How will they integrate this adventure into their life? How does it permeate the values of their marriage and the way they raise their children? And how does it affect their community? And how do they want to extend it into the fabric of, who they are in day-to-day life? I wanted to really have the characters come alive. The people that were helping us are part of the book. And I'm really proud of how it came out in that way.
That's wonderful. It sounds like this podcast in book form, because that's what we try to do here is, who are these people that do these things and why? And the more you learn about them, and usually the more you get to know lots of them, the more you realize in a lot of ways they're just normal people. They're just people making it through life, raising children, paying mortgages, working, at a job they may or may not like, and then they just get this rush of adventure through them, or it's been in them all along, and they decide to do something about it, and their life is never the same.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea of, writing a book for. We referenced it earlier in our conversation, but most people will not want to read this book because they too would like to go to the South Pole. And
right. Maybe one or two. But
but I do believe that everyone can read this book and relate to the humanity and the human desire to strive for something that maybe feels beyond your reach, and maybe access a little more of the adventurous spirit that really dwells in all of us, and what can they do to break through to feel fully alive in what is important to them and in their life, and how can they access family and community. These are the themes that I run through the book that I believe are really accessible, as you said, to anybody. You do not have to be an extreme adventure person to get something from this book. And in addition, it's really fun to go on adventures and live through the eyes of somebody else and not have to go on that adventure and feel like you really understand Antarctica and all the South Pole and just this different environment and a place that maybe you've never, I never understood a lot about it, about Antarctic until that time I was researching. I never understood it. I never knew that the continent is 1.5 times the size of the United States. I had no idea. You see it at the bottom of the globe that spins in your bedroom when you're a kid, and you have no idea how big that landmass is. Just so many things that I think people can learn about an environment and also about an expedition. What is that all about, and about themselves in relation to these themes.
I'm really excited for when it comes out and for folks to be able to check it out. How can people find the book?
The book will be available everywhere they can buy books, September 3rd, 2019. So they can find it on, it's already listed for pre-order on any kind of place they might buy online, as far as Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and other types of bookstores that are major online sellers like Powell's and those sorts of places. Powell's is in Portland, but they ship world, all around the United States. So yeah, it's out there for pre-order already. And then it'll be hopefully in their local bookstores. Libraries will hopefully be carrying it as well. I have a new author website that will be launching hopefully in the next week or two. So by the time they hear this, it should be up. And that's chrisfagan.net. And that will have all the information about the book and the adventure, the South Pole adventure, and lots of other adventures that my husband and I have, and my son have taken.
But I know that this isn't, obviously just like before, it wasn't the first experience. This isn't your last experience either. I want to be respectful of your time, but I would love just a quick, what's going on for you guys, you and your husband and your son in the future. I know you just got done with the race to Alaska that didn't go as planned. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about that?
Sure, I can give you like a quick synopsis of the. So the race to Alaska. So the Race to Alaska is an event that anybody can enter with a non-motorized craft. And so you will see anything from, monohulls, catamarans, trimarans. These are sort of big sailing boats, to kayaks and rowboats and paddleboards, stand-up paddleboards. Anything that is a watercraft. And so we decided to enter with we wanted to have a unique kind of vessel. And so we decided to enter it with a Hawaiian outrigger sailing canoe. And if you're not familiar with what that might be like, imagine a 3-man canoe. So it's a deep hulled canoe that's 30 feet long. And then the outrigger part has these 2 trampolines that sort of like a mini catamaran with floating amas on the outside and a sail. So it could sail and it could be paddled. And the reason we thought this would be a fun vessel was because you're going 750 miles through the Inside Passage, which is starting from Port Townsend, Washington, up through the Inside Passage and ending in Ketchikan, Alaska. And in that span, it's known to have a lot of wind, but also have a lot of flat water. And so we thought this would be an interesting combination to be able to paddle when there's no wind and sail when there was wind. And so we ended up purchasing this boat used from a man who builds these canoes in Hawaii called Nick Beck. And he is sort of legendary in Hawaii for building these boats. They're called Holopuni canoes. There's only about 50 that exist in the world. He's an ex-school teacher turned canoe builder, and he's 81 years old now. And he's had a lot of great adventures going from Hawaiian island to Hawaiian island on these boats. And so we thought it would be a great choice. So long story short, we enter the rate. We buy the boat. We train with it for about 6 months. And then we set off on this journey, and it's a race, but it's also an adventure. And we found out pretty quickly that this boat couldn't really compete with those big boy sailboats that could go 20, 30 knots easily, in good wind. This boat really is more of a downwind boat, and which meant we had to tack a lot more, and we couldn't go straight into the wind. So it was a great adventure of being part of the Inside Passage, and we were trying to sleep on the boat as much as possible while we're moving. We would anchor at times and get real sleep and sleep right on the boat, anchor in these beautiful bays. We saw all kinds of beautiful wildlife, breaching humpback whales. This one day, one breached 11 times in front of us. Just stunning. Porpoises swimming next to us, pristine waters. And so what happened for us is we had a great trip up until day 10, and we were in that final push, and we had finally a great prediction of wind that would be a southerly wind, which was our perfect type of wind for this boat. And so we decided we had a chance to go either inside or outside, inside the passage or outside more towards open seas in that last push to Ketchikan, and we made the decision to go outside because there was better wind. The forecast was in our favor, and so and it was a route that a lot of other boats have gone on, so it wasn't something that people don't go on. What turned out for us was the seas, the seas got bigger, the wind got stronger than had been predicted, and we found ourselves in seas that were a little more chaotic instead of more like stormy seas. So instead of swells and swells that you kind of go in and out of, some of the waves started breaking and in a chaotic way. And the boat we weren't scared the boat wasn't going to be able to handle these conditions, but what was happening was that, what did happen was in one instance, a really big, over 7-foot wave came from behind, and at the time my husband was in the stern of the boat steering, and like a kayak, you're wearing a spray skirt that goes around the hole that you're sitting in to keep water out. But what happened was this big wave came over and hit unexpectedly, knocked my husband's glasses off, punched through the spray skirt, filled the canoe halfway full of water, and then we needed to pump it out. So I take the spray skirt off, the cover off the middle area, because we were sitting up on the tramp areas with the other teammate and I. And so I start pumping like a wild, crazy woman, trying to get the water out. And I was making some good headway, but these waves were coming now from the side, and they came through. 2 more waves, I think, filled within 5 minutes. 2 more waves filled the boat to the gunnels. So now the middle part is underwater. The tramps are above water, and there's no way to pump that out when water is just flowing in. And so we were unfortunately had to make the call. It was pretty clear right away that we aren't going to be able to get this water out of this boat and be able to sail and paddle safely. If we were within close to being near land, we would have been able to get it on land and get the water out, but we were miles from shore, so that wasn't going to be possible. So we instantly we were carrying a spot tracker that you can hit an SOS button, which we did hit. Immediately we all decided that's what we have to do, and then we rated for rescue, and ultimately what happened was it was 2 hours until the Canadian Coast Guard arrived and took us to safety. So I don't know if that was the short or long version, but yeah, that gives you the details. And the good news about that is that we were all safe, and we thought we were going to lose our boat, but as it turned out, a day later we were able to mount a small little group of people to go out, and we found our boat drifting towards Ketchikan, and were able to tow it in and rescue it, and and all of our belongings. We did not lose anything except I think our map bag and a water bottle. So it was a kind of a happy ending in that regard.
No adventure, big or small, is guaranteed to go smoothly, and probably doesn't seem like nearly as big of a challenge as the South Pole, but you just never know what's going to happen out there, you know?
That's so true. And, we've done a lot of post adventure analysis, and because, when something does go sideways, you want to think about what part did I play in that? Could I have done something differently? And ultimately, we have all said, I would probably make that same decision. I would probably still go outside. The weather changed. That was out of our control. But one thing that was within our control was that, we were pretty tired going into that day and that evening, and probably would have made sense for us to go ahead and pull over, get a little more sleep, and then make that decision. So that if you hit any kind of circumstances that were beyond your control, you would have a little more, you just have all your senses about you and maybe make quicker decisions, maybe would have noticed those seas rising quicker. These are all things you never know. But that's the one thing that I will take sort of responsibility that, when we're tired, that can sort of add to those kind of cascading events. But, honestly, we thought that line that you never want to cross was a lot further than it turned out to be in those kind of seas. And when we look at a lot of other boats that went through, they were experiencing a lot of challenges as well, but they just weren't as exposed as our boat. So we learned a lot. And had I been in a younger stage of my life, I would have maybe thought about this adventure as, well, we didn't reach the goal, and somehow feel that it wasn't a worthy adventure, or that I was really let down. But I think in this case, and maybe with maturity comes really the positive side of, this was a grand adventure, and you don't ever set out on an adventure knowing what the ending is going to be. And it just reminded me of that reason of loving adventure and getting lessons that maybe you never thought you were going to get. And that's the beauty of adventure, is being open to what is going to happen and being as safe as you can while doing it. And that's what I take away from this. It was a grand adventure, and it will still live in my heart as something that I'm really proud and happy that we did.
That's what adventure is. Just a lot of unexpected things happen usually. And so I'm glad that something went wrong on this one and not on the South Pole expedition, because a lot less safety net there, to say the least.
Right.
So, well, great. Well, Chris, I want to thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for writing the book and doing this experience and talking about it. This was fantastic, and I wish you and the family the best of luck in your future endeavors. And who knows, you keep doing this, we're going to have you on again.
Right. Well, thanks so much for having me. It was really a pleasure chatting with you today. It was a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for making it happen, and we look forward to getting it out, and we'll let you know when it does.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right, you too. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for listening to this episode. It really means the world to us that you want to spend your time with us. If you'd like to help us further, please just leave us a review on iTunes, share us on social media, tell your friends about us. You can become a patron, a supporter of the show for $5 a month at patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. And if you know somebody that would make a good guest, reach out. We're always looking for good adventure and outdoor stories. And lastly, thank you to our sponsors, whose messages follow right now. Athletic Brewing makes the best non-alcoholic craft beer. Go to their website at athleticbrewing.com and use the code in our show notes to save 15% on your first order. After all this adventure talk, if you're needing some gear yourself, but you need some advice before buying, go to backpacktribe.com, where you can ask questions to the owners who have experience with all the gear, as well as all of it for sale right there on their website.